Welcome to section 7.5, solving equations involving rational expressions. So we're going to be solving equations now, not just simplifying them as we were doing before. So let's just kind of review something. If I gave you this equation, how would you solve it? I'm going to go ahead and try to solve that. Go ahead and pause the video and work through it. All right, welcome back. As you work through this, there's actually two different ways you can approach this. The first way is I can just try to add things as they are. So I can look at these first two and say, okay, I want a common denominator. Okay, the common denominator is 6. So I can multiply the first one by 3 over 3. This by 2 over 2. If you multiply, again, I'm distributing to each term. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 3x is 9x, and so forth. I now have a common denominator, so I can now add them. And notice I get 4 plus 3 is 7, and 9x minus 2x is 7x. So I have this, and now I can move, I can subtract the 5x over, and if you subtract 5, 7 minus 5 is 2, so you have 2x. Now I can multiply both sides by 6, because I multiply by 6, it's the opposite of dividing by 6. So I have 2x plus 7 equals 0 times 6, but that's just 0, so I can subtract 2, and we end up with x equals this. Now that's one way. I want to go another way. Look at all three of these terms. What is the lowest common denominator of all three? Just pause and kind of answer that question. Well, if this is the route that hopefully you were taught at some point in time, and that's that if I multiply the lowest common denominator, which is 6, if I multiply both sides by 6, notice what happens. If you multiply, it's 6 over 1 times the first, 6 over 1 times the second, and so forth. You multiply, because 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 6 divided by 3 is 2, and so forth. I'm just going to multiply one more step here and here. Now look at this and compare it to this step right here in the numerators. Notice exact same numerators. The numerators are the same. In fact, the denominators are the same at that point in time. So what this does essentially is it's the same process, but just without the denominators. And we can't just throw them away. We have to multiply by the lowest common denominator to make them go away and to get our final answer, which turns out to be the exact same thing. So this basic idea about how to find the lowest common denominator and to multiply all the terms by that is the concept that we're going to use throughout this section. So let's just do some examples. So here I have a rational expression. I want you to look at these three fractions, these three rational expressions, and I want you to determine what is my lowest common denominator. Well, hopefully you did that, and you realize the lowest common denominator is 5x. So what can I do with 5x? I can multiply all the terms by 5x. If I do that, so I'll multiply both sides, because wherever I do one side, I have to do the other. And then if I distribute that 5x, now notice, let's look at this first one. 5x divided by x, those are going to cancel out. And we have repetition. But those cancel, and I just get 5 times 8, which is 8. And 5 divided by 5 goes away, and just x times 2. And here the x's cancel. Again, I have this. Multiply those out, and we get 40 plus 2x equals negative 10. Now I want you to pause the video and go ahead and solve it at this point in time. All right, well, if you did that, subtract 40 from both sides, divide by 2, and x equals negative 25. Now that we did that, though, it is important that we take a moment and we check our answer. So how do we check our answer? Hopefully you're saying I just plug it back in. Well, let's plug that number back in for x. I need a lowest common denominator. So this one I'm going to multiply by 5 over 5. And notice it gives me this. And when you add those, I get negative 8 plus 10. So 2 25ths equals 2 25ths. Voila, our answer is correct. Now in this section, it is critical that you check your answers. there are times we'll have an example coming up that you will have an answer that does not work. And I'll show you when that happens. So let's just continue on. Let's do another example. So again, I have an example here. What was the first step we did on the last ones? Hopefully you're saying I multiplied by the lowest common denominator. So what is the lowest common denominator? Well, it's x plus 1 times x, because both denominators are prime. You can't factor them, and they're not the same. So with that in mind, can you multiply both sides by that lowest common denominator? Go ahead and pause the video and multiply this out, and then finish solving. All right, as you did this, because again, I can rewrite them as something over 1. When I multiply, notice the x plus 1s cancel, and I'm left with 3 times x, and these x's cancel, I'm left with 5 times x plus 1, or 3x equals 5x plus 5. Subtract 5x from both sides, and I get 2x. Negative 2x equals 5, or x equals negative 5 halves. Now again, we can't just rest on it. We need to check it. So I want you to pause the video and check your answer. Now as you're doing this, notice, again, we have fractions. I have to, in this one, I got to combine. So I turn 1 into 2 over 2. In this case, dividing by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So I just took the denominator and I flipped it. 2/5 is the opposite of, is the reciprocal of 5 halves. And I turn it into multiplication. How do you multiply? Well, you multiply straight across. Down here, I can add, and I add those, and I get negative 3 halves over 3 equals negative 2. But again, notice this idea is the same thing as I had here. I can divide. Division is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So it's really 3 over 1 times negative 2 over 3, which is 3's cancel, and I get negative 2 equals negative 2. So it checks out. So always check your answer. Again, let's do another one. So with this one, I want you to solve it. So find the lowest common denominator, and multiply everything by that. Go ahead. First off, lowest common denominator. What did you get? Well, 18x. So don't just multiply all the denominators together. Remember, it is the lowest. So I can say 3 and 2 both go into 18. So 18 is the smallest of all the numbers, and they both have x's, so I have an x. Now, if you multiply both sides by that, notice I'm going to distribute and multiply each of these terms by the 18x, but I'm putting over 1 to make it easier to see how things cancel. Here, 18 and 2 cancel to give me 9, and the x's go away. So I get 9 times 5. 18's cancel, and I get x times 17. And 18 divided by 3 is 6, and the x's cancel. So you multiply that out. I have here. If you made a mistake, go ahead and pause the video and finish solving it. Otherwise, keep going. So we add 6 divided by 17, and x equals 3. Let's check our answer. So if you didn't check it, go ahead and pause the video and check your answer. All right, as we do this, notice I got 5, and I have to multiply out my denominators. Well, how am I going to combine these two things here? Well, they need a common denominator. So common denominator on the side is 18. So I'm going to multiply this by 2 over 2. Then if I multiply that out, I get this. Do the subtraction. And 17 minus 2 is 15, so 15/8. But I can reduce that 5/6 because I can take factor of 3 out of each of them and cancel. So again, 5/6 equals 5/6. We're good. Our answer is correct. Notice every single one of these problems you should check, and so you should walk away from every one of these problems 100% confident that you did it right. All right, let's try this one. How would you solve this? Go ahead and try it. Well, hopefully the first thing you realize, I need to find the lowest common denominator. what is my lowest common denominator? Well, it's only x, because notice this has a denominator of 1 because it's not a fraction. Same thing here. So x is the only fraction in here, in fact. So if I multiply everything by x, I really am going to get x times x, which is x squared. Now, again, I rewrote this to x over 1, so the x's can clearly be seen to cancel. And I get x squared plus 6 minus 5x. How would you solve this equation? Hopefully you're going, wait, I can use the solving by factoring we did in the previous chapter. So again, if we add 5x to both sides, we can factor and then we can use the zero product rule, and we end up with x equals -2 or -3. All right, well, we need to check. So let's just check x equals -2 first. If you didn't check, I want you to pause it and check both answers. If you did check it, here's just a review. So I plug in -2. And 6 divided by -2 is, well, -3. And -2 minus -3 is -5. So good, yay, we won. But checking the opposite, which is -3, I wrote down the wrong thing, that's an error. I have -3, and 6 divided by -3 is, well, -2. And again, as we already found out from above, it works out. So we're good all the way. All right. I want you to try this one. Go ahead and pause the video and solve this one. Well, welcome back. First thing you should have done is actually, before I even find lowest common denominator, I would factor the denominators. It makes it easier to see. So if I factor this denominator into this form, now I can see that the lowest common denominator is really x minus 5 times x plus 5, because each of these are inside of that denominator. So now I can multiply every single term by that. Well, that means I'm going to multiply this over 1 times each and every one of the fractions, times every single term. Now we start canceling stuff. So here, that cancels everything, so just 11. Here the x plus 5s cancel, and the x minus 5s cancel over here. So that's how we get to this point in time. Then it's just a process of multiply it out and solve. So we multiply it out, 4x minus 20, 3x plus 15. So we get 4x minus 19. Move this x over. So we subtract 3x, add 9, x equals 24. Again, let's check our answer. So if you didn't do it, pause and make sure you take the time to do it. Otherwise, continue on. So again, we have 24 squared, 4 over 24 plus 5, and 24 minus 5. So we get 576 minus 25, which notice is 551. Now, I need to add this side together. Once I add that, I need a common denominator. So does 29 go into 559? The answer is yes, it goes in it 19 times. So multiply by 19 over 19. 4 times 19 is 76. Add those together, 87. If you reduce this, it turns out that 29 goes into it. Each of these goes in here 3 times and goes in here 19 times. So indeed, they are equal. So always check your answer. Last problem. All right, we've done all this. I want you to solve it and check your answer. Go ahead. All right, so first thing I would recommend is I would factor my denominator like so. Now you could try to factor this numerator. It's not really going to help you, so there's not much point in the numerator factoring. If I do that, my lowest common denominator is x plus 3 and x minus 3. So if you didn't get to that point in time, pause and multiply both sides by that. If you did, here's what we get. We multiply, we distribute, and then we cancel. So again, the x plus 3's cancel, x minus 3's cancel, all that cancels. So we have this. Multiply it out. You get 4x squared minus 12x. Be careful here because this negative is going to distribute, so you're going to get negative 36. Now when you start combining terms, we combine these, and notice I can take the 4x squared. I can subtract that from both sides. That goes away. I can add 36 to both sides, and I get this divided by negative 24, and x equals negative 3. Well, let's check our answer. So plug it in. Well, notice if I start doing some math magic, then all these numerators, but what is negative 3 plus 3? Wait a second, that's 0. And again, I have negative 3 squared, which is 9. Oh, I have something over 0 and 0. Can you divide by 0? The answer is no. It's impossible to divide anything by 0. Therefore, we have no solution. This is why you need to check your answer. This will pop up from time to time, so please, please be careful about it and make sure you take the time. Good luck, and please let me know what questions you have.